We continue, ladies and gentlemen, with international affairs. The next topic is the first 100 days of the Biden administration. And our next speaker is Mr. Bill Antholis, who happens to be a Greek American. Bill, good afternoon. Good morning in the United States. It's a pleasure to have you in the Delphi Forum. Bill Antholis is Director and CEO of the Miller Center of Public Affairs of the University of Virginia that specializes in presidential scholarship, public policy, and political history. Prior to this, Mr. Antholis served as managing director of the Brookings Institution, Washington, well-known think tank. So, Bill, we will analyze the first 100 days of the Biden administration. To many in Greece, but internationally, worldwide, especially in the United States, it's a pleasant surprise, the Biden administration, in many, many ways. What is the most important achievement of the Biden's administration in the first 100 days, Bill?
Well, first, thank you for including me. It's really a pleasure to be with you all again. And hopefully next year I can be there in person, either in Athens or in Delphi, wherever you have the meeting. I think usually the 100-day benchmark, usually the 100-day benchmark is a bit overrated because it was established for the Franklin Roosevelt administration during the great financial crisis in the 1930s. And yet, this year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, the financial crisis with it, the racial justice reckoning, President Biden has talked about the climate crisis, and then we've had a democracy crisis in the United States. Mm-hmm. Given all of those crises, maybe FDR is a good benchmark. And President Biden and his team already have passed one major legislative accomplishment, the $1.9 trillion COVID Recovery Act, which is, depending on what you count, the third or fourth CARE Act that's been passed, which is a major accomplishment. And yet, if you think about a presidential administration lasting 4 years, our view is that the first 100 days benchmark is not the appropriate one. The first year is the appropriate one, where a president establishes their team, sets up their processes, identifies their priorities, takes away from their campaign priorities and figures out, okay, what can we really accomplish? And then tries to move its legislative agenda forward. And it's really only starting to put together its team, establish its processes, and figure out with the Congress what politics will allow it to accomplish. And so already the Biden team has moved quickly, but they have a lot of work left to do.
Mm-hmm. Bill, another thing that is a reality now with the Biden administration, and it seems to many experts that the United States, the White House, the government overall is back on track, back on normal process. And many people had predicted that because the damage with the Trump administration was big, this will take some time. Is back on track the Biden administration working with the institution as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Well, on the one hand, I think the framing certainly bears to reality. President Trump, regardless of what you think of him, wanted to disrupt our political processes. He did not want to be just a regular, normal president. He had big plans and ambitions, both from a policy and a political standpoint. And President Biden is a much more conventional politician and a much more conventional administrator. And he also wants to resume a more or less normal relations with Congress. That said, what President Trump did really continued a trend that had been going on for almost 20 years in the United States. Because it's much harder to legislate, presidents felt that they've had to come in and do things more unilaterally by themselves. We saw this in the Obama administration. We saw it before in the Bush administration, where more and more actions were being taken by executive action as opposed to by working with Congress. And there are a whole lot of reasons for that. Our Congress doesn't work as well anymore. So one of the interesting things about President Biden returning to normal is he is going to now have to see whether he can work with Congress. Now, the first big legislative accomplishment that he did worked with all Democrats. He got no Republican support for the big laws that he tried to pass. He is now, and that's actually pretty consistent with what we've seen from President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, and to some degree, President Trump. Their first legislative accomplishment was done only with the support of their own party. And then what we saw President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama do was in the second half of their first year turn back and try to accomplish something with Republican support. President Clinton passed NAFTA with Republican support. President Bush passed a major educational accomplishment, No Child Left Behind, with Democratic support. President Obama was not able to get that done. He passed his first Recovery Act, largely with Democratic support, and then passed healthcare reform, largely with Democratic support. He couldn't get the Republican support for that he wanted. And so we'll see now, as President Biden turns to infrastructure, can he go back to a system where he got things done first with his party? Can he get a bipartisan accomplishment when he turns to infrastructure, which he's turning to today as he meets with not just Democratic leaders, but Republican leaders as well, Speaker Mitch McConnell and the House of Representative Minority Leader McCarthy.
Bill, what will be, you predict, the biggest challenge for President Biden during his presidency into the United States, inside the United States?
Well, these four crises are just massive. If you look back at American history, we've had economic crises before. The Great Depression was one. The 2008 financial crisis was one. There have been a few others. No two in the last 100 years as big as those two. But we've had several other economic crises. We've also had big political crises before. The 2000 election was a bit of a political crisis, which was very narrowly decided in Florida with a long contested outcome. The Civil War had essentially a contested political crisis where 7 states seceded from the Union after the outcome of the 1860 election, and that ended up leading to the Civil War. This political crisis that we've just been through in the United States rivals those crises. I don't think it's going to lead to a full-blown civil war. No one is predicting that. But the insurrection that we saw on January 6th really was a very serious crisis. It rivals things like the first peaceful transfer of power from one party to another in 1800 and 1801, a contested outcome in the 1824 presidential election, 1860, 2000. And so if you think about the combination of an economic crisis and a political crisis at the same time, those two things taken together is the context of the Biden presidency. Now, there are political challenges in both the Democratic and the Republican Party. In his own party, he has very narrow majorities in both the House and the Senate, and an uncertain electoral map, an uncertain map in the midterm elections where he's trying to hold control of Congress. And in the 2024 election, if he runs for re-election, a very narrow path to victory there. And yet the Republican Party is deeply divided, as we've seen with their own internal reckoning about how to deal with former President Trump. So let's just say it's a very complicated chessboard.
It is
and
indeed.
If I could point to one thing, I would say it's this democratic crisis in the United States and around the world.
Bill, yeah, it did. Let's move into the foreign policy. It seems that because of the COVID pandemic, because of other issues, it seems that for the whole foreign policy issue and strengthening relations with key allies for the United States is under review. What will be the priorities? What we will see in the next months or years?
Well, let me say, I share the previous panelists' view that China is the single largest foreign policy challenge facing the United States. And combined with that, I also share the view that reassembling the global coalition of democracies, starting with NATO, but then looking to Asia, our relations with Japan, Korea, Australia, and India, the so-called Asian Quad of democracies, is also important. So if you take what is a substantive priority, China, and you could add to that Russia, Iran, North Korea, and a process priority of reestablishing the alliance of democracies, those two things taken together is defining the Biden administration's outlook. And they have moved forward, I think, in a very positive and constructive way in that regard.
Okay, let's move to Turkey, our favorite here in Greece topic. The relation between the United States and Turkey, it seems that are the lowest point for the last decades. How difficult is going to be the next years? And in this equation, what Greece's role there?
Well, when you say how difficult, let me say that there are enormous benchmarks of strength that the United States faces in its relations with Turkey, which have become very complicated. And the strengths are that we're not actually as reliant on Turkey as we once were. I think one thing that's happened in the last set of years as Turkey has become a less reliable NATO ally and partner is the U.S. has diversified and strengthened its relations with Greece and Cyprus, with other players and partners in the region. I think that Greece's own stronger working relationship with Israel and Cyprus with respect to Turkey is also a strength in the relationship. And the return to a stronger NATO alliance will also help, although there is work to be done there. I think that sort of lays out the agenda for the second part of your question, which is, what is it going to be like for the United States to work with Greece? I think, as I've said and written elsewhere, President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken know Greece well. They know Greece's partners well. And rather than seeing it as a U.S., Greece, Turkey triangle, I think it will work through these two different multilateral efforts. First, the multilateral effort to reestablish NATO as an alliance, of which, of course, Greece is an important member, but then also working with the U.S., Greece, Cyprus, Israel as a set of partnerships. And this is not to encircle Turkey in any sense, but I think it is to reinforce with Turkey that the best way to establish and reestablish ties with the United States is to think about these multilateral arrangements as pathways for the future for Turkey to begin to look to the West again as its future, as opposed to looking to the East.
Bill, thank you so much for your interesting views that you shared with us. Really, thank you. Good luck to you and good luck to New York Yankees. I see the hack back then. I know you're a fan.
Thank you for that, and I look forward to seeing all my friends in Greece when I come in June.
Okay, take care. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.